Hey everyone, welcome to the show. So today I wanted to talk about the humility theme that's within the Bible and why that's important, and what is it really getting at. And the reason why this kind of hit me whenever I was thinking about this topic was I've often talked to other Christians, and they're just, they're kind of like, why does God need so much praise? Why are we bending over backwards constantly to please God? Why does God need that? If he really loves us, then why are we always just bending over backwards to please him? And so they kind of talk about God in regards to almost like an unwanted house guest. And we invite the Holy Spirit to live within us. And so, what else do you got to do to make God happy? And see, that's what's interesting is everybody looks at this, or most Christians that are, especially new Christians, are like, God's just needy, and God is not a loving God. He's an angry God. And then they refer to the God of the Old Testament versus the God of the New Testament and try to differentiate different things between, the teachings of Christ, which are still the teachings of the Old Testament. But here's the thing. You got to look at it another way. And that is, in the Old Testament, God was the God of a people. And we did this to ourselves. You think back to Adam and Eve before the fall. They had a personal relationship with God. And then we fell. We sinned against God because of our pride and, because of a lie. And so we lost that personal relationship. We separated ourselves from God. And then you have being God of a people. And that the Israelites were God's chosen people. And so this personal relationship has gotten severed along this time. Jesus brings us back to that personal relationship, but it's through the Holy Spirit, because the Holy Spirit is going to live on. And it lives within inside us. It's the Comforter. So how does that relate to humility? Well, number one is that you have to be humble to start learning. If you lead life in pride, you don't learn anything. That's why, God refers to wisdom and fools. A wise person will speak through their action. A fool's going to tell you what you want to hear all day long. They're going to lie. They're going to do whatever it is because they're trying to make you do or think a certain way. But more likely it's not out of real wisdom. And the thing is we always say talk is cheap, and that's very true. Actions are what make differences, is our actions. Not just talking about it, but actually doing it. And a humble person will lower themselves to service. Isn't that what people really want? They don't want you to, they're in need of getting their lawn mowed. They just don't want you to tell them that you're going to do it. They want to see you do it because they need it. And humility starts with that, because humility is the basis of service, and service teaches us wisdom. Isn't that kind of wild? You think about it. Service teaches me wisdom. I don't know about you all, but I'm a person that honestly learns by doing. You can put a book in front of me and that's cool. And maybe I'll retain or get about half of it, but how I really learn in my jobs and just who I am is by doing. by making the mistake and learning from it. In order to recognize that you made a mistake, you first have to humble yourself that you made a mistake. See, that humility leads to learning. Humility starts the path of wisdom. Proverbs 22:4 says, humility brings blessings, riches, honor, and life. That's something else humility brings. It brings us to a point where we realize we're not perfect. We realize we're never going to be good enough. And to depend on God. Another way to think of it brings riches and honor. Well, if you got a new job, would you walk into that job telling everybody what to do, or would you listen to your boss who's been doing it longer? Probably listen to the boss. And guess what? That's going to allow you to get a job. Being able to admit to your mistakes and being okay with learning gives you recognition among your peers. You earn honor. And that's followed up by, actually this comes before this verse, but Proverbs 11:2, pride leads to distance or disgrace. Humility leads to wisdom. Lowering ourselves helps us learn how to be better. And whenever we're better, we do better. All the way around. Malachi 6:8 says, God requires us to walk humbly with him. So how are you supposed to learn or take God's lessons if you know more than God? Kind of like, how do you if you walk into a new employment and you act like you own the place, how long you think you're going to last? James 4:10 says, humble yourself before the Lord and he will exalt you. See, this is where the Bible turns society on its head. Most people believe that they step on whoever they want to get to a place that they deem will give them glory or give them honor or give them recognition amongst people. But it's how you got there. If you made a lot of people mad on the way up, and trust me on this, when you fall, there's nobody there to break your fall. Everybody just moves out the way. Where if you go and earn your place, wherever it may be, with honor and dignity, and you respect people as you go up the ladder, so to speak, just like say your work. Say you worked yourself up from the floor to the desk. And you have people under you. They're going to respect you a whole lot more because of how you got to your place of leadership. Most people don't respect leaders that just are given leadership. A lot of times they don't really know what you're doing or what you're going through, so they don't really respect you. They just kind of have to deal with you. So God's pulling us to a place to become humble so we can learn. And if you think this isn't something that God didn't do on his own first, he did this through his son, Jesus. God lowered himself to humanity to be crucified. Not just killed, crucified. And that's one of the most painful, disgraceful ways a person can die is through crucifixion. And God lowered himself to that existence to be crucified in our place because we're never going to be good enough. So that's why he died for us. When you think of things in that light, you think that you serve a God who served you first till death. Puts a whole different spin on the good news of Jesus Christ. The Bible is complete, and the Bible is correct in its description of Jesus. You don't need an extra book. You don't need a companion book to the Bible. You don't need any of that. If you have the Bible, you have the story. You have the complete outlook of Christ and a complete profile of God. And the only way that we get closer to God to know Him is to read that very book. Not a companion piece, not some preacher's, leftover sermons, not what a priest tells you or a priest's pamphlet tells you. Get in the Word for yourself. And that's how you get to know God. You have to humble yourself just to read His Word. But it's so enriching. We look, and here's the thing. I'm asking you to read the Bible. How easy it for us to get a self-help book. You ever notice that? People are like, I'm going to buy a book. I'm guilty of it too. Buy a book to fix my problems. You know what? I haven't found anything in a self-help book that I haven't found in the Bible. Isn't that amazing? We keep trying to go everywhere but to Christ. We try to go everywhere but to God for our problems. And this theme is throughout the Bible. It's telling this story of humility. If you think every time Israel, the people, humbled themselves before God, went away from their ways to live a better life, live a cleaner life, live a righteous life, they always came out on top. And in a lot of those instances, God created confusion. They didn't even have to go to war. Those people ended up getting confused. There's plenty of times where you see that in the Bible. Or God has protected a prophet. So God, He's with us. You can feel Him. I've seen preachers, you ever heard of this thing called exorcism? A lot of people bank on it, but one thing that I've seen a lot of times and heard in life is that whenever a Christian enters the room, somebody with the fire of God in them, the spirit tends to leave. To this day, every house that I've lived in, I have put a Bible in my house first. When we bought it, leave a Bible in there overnight. That's me letting whatever else is out there know that this is a dwelling for a child of God. Never had any real issues. I've known lots of other people. I have stayed in houses with other people, and I know that spirits do exist. I've seen stuff with my own eyes. So, seeing is believing in a lot of ways, and I've seen that and I believe that. But nothing ever messed with me. And a lot of times it subsided. Not saying I'm anybody great, but I know I am a child of God. And I know that my friends who have lived in houses that are strange, and I've went to stay with them, everything dulled down while I was staying there. But it would kick up when I left. And those that became Christians, well, guess what? Problems started getting less. We just have to learn how to live according to God, and all that other stuff stays away. I know that some people say, I prayed to God, but how did you do it? How did you do it? Because there's some people that just say they're trying for a purpose. The thing is you believe in God regardless of the reward that you think you're getting. You become a child of God just because you want to become a child of God, not because of what you think you're going to get out of it. It's a different experience. You humble yourself before God. See how that works together? You gain wisdom through God by becoming humble to God. Anyway, guys, I think the world of all of you, and I hope that you gain something from this in this lesson. And then next week, we're going to talk about, the verse in the Bible. It talks about basically maiming yourself. It's better to be maimed and go into heaven than be whole and go to hell. We're going to take a look at that verse kind of talk about it a little bit. Try to make some sense of it. Anyway, guys, have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you next time.